question, feel free to chip in, put your hand up, give me a wave if you want to add your comments or thoughts at any time, won't you? I want to introduce myself. My name is Rachel Sloan. I'm a freelance writer and broadcaster and Suffolk resident, of course. I have to get that bit in as well. I'm often asked to chair these events because sometimes it's useful to have an outsider to do these things. That means I know very little about the internal politics and working of the council, but we do have the experts here, plus in the room, and if any questions come up that are factual that we don't know the answer with, then they will be taken away and sorted out, and the answer will come back to you. So all of that is planned for today. We've got a variety of topics to discuss and questions to ask. Some have come through before the day, some are appearing on the screen as we talk, and if you want to add an anonymous comment or question, please do so. Perhaps I should introduce the panel now who are going to take your comments and thoughts. Over there on the left-hand side, we have, of course, Mark Hardingham, who's the Chief Fire Officer. And next to him, Nicola Beach, who's the Chief Executive. So thank you both very much indeed for coming. And we've divided them so they can see the screen. And I made sure I didn't put men versus woman. I make sure we mix them up as well. And over here we've got Paul Little, who's the Area Director for Adult Community Services. And we've got Councillor Rebecca Hopsenberger, who's the Cabinet Member for Adult Care. So what one can't answer, hopefully others will. We'll get their views on the various different topics as we go. But I thought perhaps we could start by asking each of you in turn what you think the biggest challenge facing Suffolk County Council is when it comes to equality. So Nicola, perhaps we ought to start with you. What do you think is the biggest challenge?
Thanks Rachel. So I've done a lot of work, wherever I've worked, I've been in all of my career at different levels and doing all sorts of jobs. Sort of started off in the waste world actually, which was quite sort of just naturally male dominated. Some professions seems to me just are. It's around when as a district council you just get this natural sort of planners tend to be male and housing female. I'm being very generalistic, but it just sort of seems to play out of that. When I do actually do personally, and I'm really pleased to see that Springboard is on our agenda for Suffolk because I've been asking about that for quite some time. So I personally support a lot of those programmes. In fact, I'm speaking at the Essex Springboard programme next week because they asked me to come back each year and do that even though I'm no longer working in Essex. There are a number of things. So I think the headlines for me that I took from all the papers and the equality report that came out just recently, and forgive me, some of you will know this, but the kind of headlines I took was we employ more women. I think we broadly, and I'm not going to sit here and say we've got it absolutely right, but broadly we have equal pay for equal levels of work, so that's not the issue. But we have an underrepresentation of women in senior roles, so the average pay for women within the organisation is less. So that's the kind of gender gap as it's been defined. 71% of our staff, of our colleagues, are female. But only 53% are in senior managers, where actually you would expect that to be at least a reflection, if not more. So clearly, there is an issue about women being able to get into those senior roles. And one of the key factors seems to be, and this has come up in many places where I worked, including Essex County Council, where I was involved in a similar debate, was about the number of women that work part-time. And that seems to be a barrier in terms of more of our senior roles are filled by people doing full-time roles, and I led a debate on this actually regionally a couple of years ago now, where there was a real push of the LGA looking at this about how we can change, I suppose, our thinking and our mindset that senior roles can be job shared and can be done part-time. One of my observations, sort of tongue-in-cheek a little bit, would be it's amazing how many, and I am going to make a comment here, so forgive me guys in the room. How many male chief executives manage to go on to flexible retirement at the end of their career and do 3 or 4 days a week, maybe less. And yet when they come to re-recruit that post, if in fact they do, it then goes back to full-time. So that's one of the frustrations I have with the system. So there's clearly some issues there about, and I know this will be broader than gender, but clearly some issues about women part-time, full-time. And one of the things I would say when I speak to a lot of women, I try really hard never to say no if someone asks for some help or some advice or mentoring. I haven't got all the answers. I'm not trained professional in this area, but just my kind of experience. Is confidence of women actually is a bit. I'd be really interested to get people's views on that. Is the self-confidence of women to apply for jobs, and I've taken chances over the years deliberately on in a sensible way, but deliberately on different colleagues, different backgrounds. I once recruited a project manager to build a leisure centre, and all the panel, all the applicants were male. Lots of experience in the Capital World programme, but we took a chance on a younger female, and it just was brilliant, and it's just sort of changing your mindset, I think. So our own unconscious bias is really important, how we challenge ourselves. I include myself in this, not just in terms of gender and men, women, but actually in ethnicity, protected characteristics, flexible, part-time. I think I have to kind of check myself in the language I use, because I set the tone, and I'm very aware of that. A couple of other thoughts, if I may, just very quickly on general terms, because I was involved in an LGA debate on women in local government, and it's great to have Becky here as a female councillor, a senior councillor. There's a real issue actually about getting women into the democratic system, and look at the hassle that some of our and the abuse, actually, let's use the right word, that some of our female councillors and our female MPs, and I'm not saying that men don't get that. But actually there's, recently some of the behaviour, and it's not that women should be treated differently, it's about respect actually, but it's who they choose to pick on, I suppose, is the commentary in the press. And a couple of other comments I'd make on that. So one is, it's really important that our democratic systems represent the people of Suffolk and the people of Essex and wherever else it is. So if we haven't got enough councillors coming through, and I'm sure Becky won't mind mentioning, I have had a conversation about greater female representation in cabinet. But it's difficult for female councillors sometimes as well, and Becky's far more qualified to speak about that also as a very busy mum, as I know, so I won't put words into your mouth. But there's something about the technology and the flexibility and how we do our work patterns there. And of course one of the things I'd also comment is that often a number of our councillors now are twin-hatted, so they are fulfilling county council roles, maybe district roles and parish, and that's a really busy agenda to manage. I'll stop there. I've got some other thoughts on
they'll come out, I'm sure, as we go along. So we'll look forward to the day when there's a job share for chief executive.
Oh yeah. Why not? Yeah.
Mark, similar things in the fire service?
Similar things, certainly some common themes from what Nicola's just talked about. I'll just pick a couple of two things really, slightly different. One, it made me reflect on the journey of health and safety in organisations versus the journey of equality and inclusion in organisations. Health and safety has been kicking around certainly seriously since 1974 when the legislation came in, and as the person who chairs the Safety, Health and Wellbeing Board in the County Council, it does feel like health and safety is pretty much embedded in business as usual, and managers just do it as part of their daily role. So I think one of the challenges for the council is about getting equality, diversity and inclusion to a position where it just is considered to be business as usual when people are thinking about what they do. And within fire we brought a company in fairly recently to do some work with us as a senior leadership team about our own approach around equality, diversity and inclusion. And there was something that the woman who was running the day said that I wrote down and has stuck with me ever since, and I've used it frequently, is that if you ask most people who are leaders and managers in the organisation, and we have hundreds and hundreds of those, if they're a good leader and manager, then the vast majority would say, yeah, I think I do a pretty good job. And the point that she made is that you cannot be a good leader if you don't do equality, diversity and inclusion really well. And I don't think people necessarily think like that. I think it's too often regarded as an optional thing I do as well, alongside my leadership and management role.
So really we've got to get to the point where you don't need conferences such as this, you don't need debates such as this, because it's so much within the organisation anyway that we'd have nothing to talk about, would we? So thank you very much indeed. What about you, Rebecca? What do you think is a big challenge?
So if I talk from a member's point of view, I think, I suppose when I became a councillor in 2004, at the time I felt as if I'd broken the mould a bit, because I was under 30, I was female, and I was working full time as well. And when I looked around the table at some of the meetings that I went to, I was definitely a different demographic to what was sitting around the table of the male and retired variety of councillors. And I'm glad to see we've got 2 female councillors in the audience today. So I think things have changed, but I then broke the mould by getting pregnant while I was a councillor as well, which was pretty unheard of at the time, it's not so much now. And I had two children, and it was quite interesting, the challenge that I had to nip out of meetings to breastfeed my children and things like that. And so I was constantly escorted by my grandparents and my parents so in order for them to look after the children while I then nipped in and out. And I made a conscious decision when I had my children that I wouldn't take on too many extra roles or senior roles because of how I thought that might be perceived by my colleagues. So I guess I thought that it would be seen as a weakness, me being a mum, and that I might have to take time out to look after my children if they were ill as such. And so I made a conscious decision not to push myself, and then I sort of thought about it. I said, actually, no, being a mum and being a parent actually brings strength to the role, it's not a disadvantage. And it was more my feelings that I was being perceived as a weakness. So when someone asks me now, what strengths do you bring to the table with regards to your role? I said, well, normality. I'm a mum, I'm a working parent, and actually that's now a strength that I actually talk about now. And so I think there's a lot about perception. It was presumed that a woman and a mum particularly couldn't put in the hours. And there are long hours being a councillor. We have meetings during the day, but often I might have 3 or 4 parish council meetings at night. I might not get back until 10:30 in the evening. So it was perception that I wouldn't be able to put in the hours perhaps my male counterpart would, because of the fact that I was a mum, and it was assumed that the parenting role should be that of the mother. But that was something about my bias as well that was built into me. So that's why I think it's important to actually raise awareness, but also have really positive role models for people to see that things can change, and that the more positive the role models are, the next generation will then see, okay, yeah, I can become a councillor, I can go into local government, I can do this, and it is a juggling act. And I hope that my children now, they don't know any different than mum being a councillor. So they will assume that's part of the norm, so then they will then carry on that perception going forward.
Lovely, thank you. And finally, Paul, what do you think are big challenges?
I think one of the things we need to, and this kind of speaks to and echoes what Mark said to some degree, is the extent to which the culture of our organisation embeds issues around supporting diversity and difference, which is profoundly important and valuable to us as an employer. It's not just something we need to accommodate in some way. There is real value in that. And so how we as an organisation understand and normalise the way in which we approach those sort of things. And I also think aspects around equality and diversity are kind of indivisible in some respects. So, issues around race, sex and other protected characteristics, there is a common, they're not all the same thing, don't get me wrong, but there is a commonality of approach when you look at organisational culture which supports and values that sense of diversity. And as I say, really understands the particular value that has for the employer as well as in supporting people who work within that organisation. I mean, very specifically, I'm very interested in how we move forward with flexible working options, and in particular, how we support managers to enable people to work more flexibly, and kind of profound sort of signals that we give in relation to that, because flexibility is a two-way street. There are advantages to the employer as well as the employee around that, and we have to shift from looking at this as a problem to a position where we see the advantages of valuing diversity, and that would be a profound cultural shift, which I think we should be aiming at.
Okay,